Hello, welcome to 509 Divine Pines Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Daniel Pena. Today we are called, man, we are talking about the Vril. I apologize, man. This is a deep subject. Even thinking about it is just astonishing. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into it. It is a deep read, so stay tuned. The Vril Society. The first hint of the Vril Society's existence was discovered in a scene that would not have been out of place in one of Dennis Wheatley's occult thrillers. On April 25th, 1945, it is reported a group of battle-weary Russian soldiers were making their cautious way through the shattered remnants of Berlin, mopping up the isolated pockets of German resistance that remained in the heart of the Third Reich. The soldiers moved carefully from one wrecked building to another in a state of constant readiness against the threat of ambush. In a grounded floor room of one blasted building, the soldiers made a surprising discovery. Lying in a circle on the floor were the bodies of 6 men, with a seventh corpse in the center. All were dressed in German military uniforms, and the dead man in the center of the group was wearing a pair of bright green gloves. The Russians' assumptions that the bodies were those of soldiers was quickly dispelled when they realized that the dead men were all Orientals. One of the Russians, who was from Mongolia, identified the men as Tibetans. It is also evident that the Russian soldiers, men, appeared that they clarified that these men were not dying in battle, like they just committed suicide. Over the following week, hundreds of more Tibetans were discovered in Berlin. Some of them had clearly died in battle, while others had committed ritual suicide, like the other ones discovered by the Russian unit. What were Tibetans doing in Nazi Germany towards the end of the Second World War, committing suicide in mass in circles? The Vril force, or Vril energy, was said to be derived from the black sun, represented as a swastika made up of sig runes, which supposedly exist in the center of the earth, giving light to the Vrilya and putting out radiation in the form of Vril. The term Schwarze Sonne, black sun, also referred to as the Sonnenrad, sun wheel, is a symbol of esoteric and occult significance. Its design is based on a sun wheel mosaic incorporated into a floor of Wolfsburg Castle during the Nazi era. It is also used in occult currents of Germanic neo-paganism and in the Immanenschaft or Armanenschaft inspired esotericism. The Vril force or Vril energy was said to be derived from the black sun, a big ball of prima materia, which supposedly exists in the center of the earth, giving light to the Vrilya and putting out radiation in the form of the Vril. The Vril Society believed that Aryans were the actual biological ancestors of the black sun. This force was known to the ancients under many names, and it has been called Chi, Ohas, Vril, Astrolight, Odic forces, and Orgone. In the discussion of the 28th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry called Knight of the Sun or Prince Adept, Albert Pike said, "There is in nature one of most potent force, by means whereof a single man who could possess himself of it and should know how to direct it could revolutionize and change the face of the world. This is the force that the inner occult circle of the Thule were so desperately trying to unleash upon the world, for which the Vril Society had apparently groomed Adolf Hitler. Vril is a substance first described in Edward Bulwer's Leighton's 1871 novel The Coming Race, which was later reprinted as Vril, the Power of the Coming Race. The novel is an early example of science fiction. However, many early readers believed that its account of a superior subterranean master race and the energy form called Vril was accurate, to the extent that some Sophists accepted the book as truth. The Vril race was originally published anonymously in late 1871, but Bueller Lytton was known to be the author. Samuel Butler's Erewhon, or Nowhere in Reverse, was also published anonymously in March 1872, and Butler suspected that Its initial success was due to it being taken by many as a sequel to Bueller-Lytton, The Coming Race. The uses of Vril in the novel among the Vril vary from an agent of destruction to a healing substance. According to Z, the daughter of the narrator's host, Vril can be changed into the mightiest agency over all types of matter, both animate and inanimate. It can destroy like lightning or replenish life, heal, or cure. It is used to rend waves through solid matters. Its light is said to be steadier, softer, and healthier than that from any flammable material. It can also be used as a power source for animating mechanisms. Vril can be harnessed by the use of Vril staff or by mental concentration. A Vril staff is an object in the shape of a wand or a staff which is used as a channel for Vril. So it's like one of these vaccines, they look like wands and staffs. It is also said that if an army met another army and both had command of the Vril force, both sides would be annihilated. Considering Bueller-Lytton's occult background, many commentators were convinced that the supposedly fictionalized Vril was based on a real magical force. Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, endorsed this view in her book Isis Unveiled 1877, and again in Die Guillaume Hurley, The Secret Doctrine 1888. And Blavatsky's The Vril Power and it's attained by superhuman elite are worked into a mystical doctrine of race. The racial ideas of modern Blavatsky, considering root races and the emergence of a spiritually developed type of human being, Aryan man in the Aquarian age, were avidly accepted by the 19th century German nationalists who mixed theosophical occultism with anti-Semitism and the doctrine of the racial supremacy of the Aryan or Indo-European peoples. In Wiley Lay's article, Pseudoscience in Nazi Land, in the science fiction magazine Astounding Science Fiction, he attempted to explain to his readers how National Socialism could have fallen on such a fertile ground in Germany. He explained this with the high popularity or rational convictions in Germany during the time. Among other pseudo-scientific groups, he mentions a very peculiar one. The next group was literally founded upon a novel. The group, which I think called itself Warren Heitzen Gesellschaft, or Society for Truth, and which was more or less localized in Berlin, devoted its spare time looking for Vril. The article by Lay describes a perpetual motion generator based on Vril and is the main basis for the speculation that developed later. The Society for Truth that Lay described was conducting research on the existence of Vril. The speculation surrounding the Third Reich wonder weapons might support links to research to the existence and application possibilities of Vril. For example, the perpetuated top secret and highly sensitive scientific or technological device, Die Glock. Die Glock, German for the bell, is perpetuated top secret Nazi scientific technological device, secret weapon, or Wunderwaffe. Is that from Call of Duty? It is associated with the Nazi occultism, anti-gravity, or free energy research. So that fifth dimensional research, these guys supposedly had it. And they brought it over with Operation Paperclip. Go check it out yourself. Allegedly an experiment carried out by the Third Reich scientists working for the SS in a German facility known as Die Reis near Winkelklaas Mine. So Operation Paperclip just brought all of these scientists over to America in the 40s. That's all I was really saying. You can really get into it if you search it, though. Die Glock is described as being a device made out of a hard, heavy metal, approximately 9 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet high, having a shape similar to that of a large bell. This device ostensibly contained two counter-rotating cylinders, which would be filled with a mercury-like substance, element 115. Additional substances said to be employed in the experiment, referred to as light metal, included thorium and beryllium peroxides. D Glock emitted strong radiation when activated. More precisely, the Luminous Lodge or Vril Society was a secret community of occultists in pre-Third Reich Berlin. The Berlin Vril Society was in fact a sort of inner circle for the Thule Society, whereas the related Thule Society ended up focusing primarily upon materialistic and political agendas. The Vril Society put its attention on the other side and etheric technologies. One important member was Karl Haushofer, and members included Alfred Rosenberg, Dr. Theodor Morell, later the Führer's Dr. Heinrich Himmler, Hermann Göring, and Hitler himself. It was also thought to be in close contact with the English group known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Vril Society in Germany believed that the Aryan race was a creation of Aeon through the median of the black sun, which is represented as the form of the swastika, and had originated close to Pleiades star cluster from a planet orbiting the star Aldebaran, which translates as the follower. That sounds like one of the planets from Star Wars. Presumably, because of this bright star appears to be following the Pleiades or Seven Sisters star cluster in the night. The upshot of this belief was that the Aryans were originally aliens of divine origin, heaven born, and this information came from a young girl called Maria Orsic, in cooperation with the occultist Baron Rudolf von Sebentendorf, the Gurdjieff disciple Karl Haushofer, the engineer and ace pilot Lothar Weiss, prelate Journat of the secret or of the Society's Templi Marsoni, which is Latin and means the inheritors of the Knights Templar. Maria Orsic was born in Vienna. Her father was Croatian. She was the head of All Germany Society for Metaphysics, founded in the early 20th century as a female circle of mediums who are involved in extraterrestrial telepathic contact. The society was later renamed for Gesellschaft der Frauen des Vril. In 1917, Moria Orsic is said to have made contact with extraterrestrial entities from Aldebaran with her female Vril circle. At the end of September 1917, Sebentendorf met with the members of the Lords of the Black Stone at Untersberg to receive the power of the Black Stone, after which the Secret Society was named. In December 1919, a small circle of persons from the Thule Gesellschaft, the Vril Society, and the Der Herren vom Schwarzenstein, or the Lords of the Black Stone, said to be the true meaning of the double sig rune SS. Oh, so the Lords of the Black Stone would, and the Vril Society made the SS. So the SS members are really deep in the occult too. They're not just hitmen. They're deep occultists. Met in a specially rented Forster's lodge near Berchtesgaden, close to the home of Dietrich Eckart, and here is direct linked with Hitler and close to Untersberg. Take note, the Holy Grail is a holy stone. Persian Arabic was said to be a black violet crystal or stone, half quartz, half amethyst, through which the higher powers communicated with humanity. It has been speculated that such stone was the essential power source of the Ark of the Covenant. And I mean, just to kind of get a mental picture of what it could be, not saying it is, but what a large crystal block that powers up. Think of Mecca and how all those people go around in circles and circles over that big old black stone, and how much electricity is being generated in that stone itself. I mean, I'm sure that stone could be powered up into something. Not and anyways, you get the idea. They were accompanied by the medium Maria Orsic, and another medium known only as Sigrun. Maria had mediumistically received transmission in a secret Templar script, a language unknown to her, with the technical data for the construction of a flying machine. According to real documents, these telepathic messages also came from the solar system Aldebaran, which is 64 light years away in the constellation Taurus. The Vril Society not only taught concentration exercises designed to awaken the forces of the Vril, their main goal was to achieve Raumflug, space flight to reach Aldebaran. To achieve this, the Vril Society joined the Thule Gesellschaft and the SS, that Black Stone SS, to fund the ambitious program involving an interdimensional flight machine based on psychic revelations from the Aldebaran machines. So that group, the Black Stone, which turned out to be the SS, doesn't that sound familiar? Blackwater. Okay, okay. And so these guys want to go back to their original place of power and the source of these energies. I'm not saying Mars may be, but if Martians were real, these dudes are trying to go back to Mars to go to their source of power, or another planet that's just, hypothetical, that's just theoretical, you know. So you can imagine how some of these space flights are led by people who want to go back to their occulted origins. Not only was the Vril a new form of energy, but it was also the force that the inner occult circle of the Thule Gesellschaft are so desperately trying to unleash upon the world, which the Vril Society were working with Adolf Hitler to achieve. The idea of mutation and transformation into a higher form of God man was envisioned through the Vril in Bueller Lytton's The Coming Race. Lytton himself was an initiate of the Rosicrucians and was well versed in arcane esoteric philosophies, and of course in the greatest advances in the sciences of his day. Through his romantic works of fiction, he expressed the conviction that there are beings endowed with superhuman powers. These beings will supplant us and bring about a formidable mutation in the elect of the human race. Bueller Lytton was considered in his lifetime to be one of the greatest writers in the English language. Edward George Earl Lytton Bueller Lytton, first Baron Lytton, born May 25th, 1803, was an English politician, poet, playwright, and novelist, immensely popular with the reading public, and wrote a stream of best-selling dime novels, which he earned a fortune with. He is credited with the appellation for the Germans Das Volk der Dichter und Denker, and is the people of poets and thinkers. Bueller Lytton penned many other works which drew heavily on his interest in the occult and contributed to the birth of the science fiction genre. Its story of a subterranean race waiting to reclaim the surface of Earth is an early science fiction theme. The book popularized the hollow Earth theory and may have inspired Volkschisch Aryan mysticism. His term Vril lent its name to Bovril meat extract, bovine Vril. Okay. That's pretty funny. Unfortunately, Leighton's reputation for vanity, ostentation, and eccentricity attracted a good deal of hostility from the press, and this has damaged his subsequent literary reputation to a disproportionate extent, with the result that today his books are extremely hard to find, and his works is seldom, and if at all, taught in universities in English-speaking world. Throughout his career, Bueller-Lytton wrote on many themes, including romance, politics, history, social satire, melodrama, and the occult. It is perhaps unsurprising, therefore, that he should have turned to the subject of utopian science fiction with the coming race. In this novel, a narrative traveler and adventurer of independent means explores a mind of an unmanned city and location of vast subterranean world inhabited by a superior race of humans called the Vril. Once tenants of the Earth's outer surface, the Vril were forced to retreat underground by a natural catastrophe similar to the biblical flood many thousands of years ago. Their technology is far in advance of anything to be found in the world of the ordinary humanity and is based on the application of a force known as Vril, befriended by a young female Vril named Z. The narrator asked about the nature of the Vril force. Therefore, Z began to enter into an explanation of which I understood very little, for there is no word in any language I know which is an exact synonym for Vril. So Z, you can think about the movie Ants. Yeah, I should call it electricity, except that it comprehends in its manifold branches other forces of nature to which are in our scientific nomenclature differing names are assigned, such as magnetism, galvanism. These people consider that in Brill they have arrived at the unity in natural angelic agencies, which has been conjectured by many philosophers above ground, and which Faraday thus intimates under the more cautious terms of correlation. I have long held an opinion says that the illustrationist experimentalist, almost amounting to a conviction in common. I believe with many of the lovers of natural knowledge that this various forms under which the forces of matter are made manifest have one common origin, or in other words, are so directly related and mutually dependent that they are convertible, as it were, into one another and possess equivalents of power in their action. According to Z, all Vril are trained in the application of Vril, which can be used to control the physical world, including the minds and bodies of others, as well as to enhance the telepathic and telekinetic potential of the human mind. The Vril force is often often applied through the use of a device known as the Vril staff, which, like the Vril force itself, requires many years to master. The narrator is not allowed to hold one for fear of some terrible accident occasioned by my ignorance in use. The Vril staff is hollow and has in handle several stops, keys, and springs by which its force can be altered, modified, or directed. So that one process it destroys, by another it heals, by one it can rend the rock, by another disperse the vapor, by one it affects bodies, by another it can exercise a certain influence over minds. During his protracted stay in the subterranean realm, the narrator learns of the systems of the government by which the Royal live. There are a single ruling supreme magistrate who abdicates the position at the first sign of advancing age. Although their society is entirely free of crime or strife of any kind, they consider strength and force to be among the finest virtues, and the triumph of the strong over the weak to be in perfect accordance with nature. Democracy and free institutions, to them, merely the crude experiments of an immature culture. The government of the tribe of the Villarreal were apparently very complicated, but really very simple. It was based upon a principle recognized in theory, though the very little carried out in practice above ground, viz., that the object of all system of philosophical thought tends to the attainment of unity, or the ascent through all intervening labyrinths to the simplicity of a single first cause or principle. Thus, in politics, even Republican writers have agreed that the benevolent autocracy would ensure the best administration. If there were any guarantees for its continuance or against its gradual abuse of the powers according to it, there was in this society nothing to induce any of its members to covet the cares of office. No honors, no insignia of higher rank were assigned to it. The supreme magistrate was not distinguished from the rest by superior habitation or revenue. On the other hand, the duties awarded to him were marvelously light and easy, requiring no preponderant degree of energy or intelligence. After a number of adventures in the subterranean world and a great many conversations with its denizens, and narrator comes to the following conclusion regarding the ultimate origins of the fantastic Vril race. The people, though originally not only of our human race, but as seems to me clear by the roots of their language, descended from the same ancestors of the great Aryan family, from which in varied steams has flowed the dominant civilizations of the world, and having, according to the myths and the histories, passed through phases of society familiar to ourselves, had yet now developed into a distinct species with which it was impossible that any community in the upper world could amalgamate, and that if they ever emerged from these neither recesses into the light of day, they would, according to their own traditional persuasions of their ultimate destiny, destroy and replace our existent varieties of man. Although greatly impressed with the knowledge and accomplishments of the Vril, the narrator is nevertheless terrified by their power and the ease which they wield, implying at one point that should have he angered them, they would have no compunction in turning their Vril staffs on him and reducing him to cinders. This uneasiness, coupled with the natural desire to return to the upper world and the life with which he is familiar, prompts the narrator to begin seeking a means of escape from the subterranean world of the Vril aid. Comes to the unlikely form of Z, who has fallen in love with him and has attempted to persuade him to stay, but who nevertheless understands that and unrequited love cannot result in happiness for either of them. It is she who leads him back to the mine shaft for which he first entered the realm of the Vril. Upon his return home, the narrator begins to ponder the wonders which he beheld far below the surface of the earth, and once again hints the possible dreadful fate awaiting a blissfully unaware humanity at the hands of the coming race. In the final chapter, we read, "The more I think of a people commonly developing in regions excluded from our sight and deemed uninhabitable by our sages, powers surpassing our most disciplined modes and virtues, to which our life, social and political, becomes antagonistic in proportion to our civilization advances. The more devoutly I pray the ages may yet elapse before there emerge into sunlight our inevitable destroyers." That was the book. And now continuing upon the real race. It is an assumption of many occultists that the coming race is a fact disguised as fiction, that Bueller Lytton based his engaging novel on a genuine body of esoteric knowledge. He was greatly interested in the Rosicrucians, the powerful occult society which arose in the 16th century and which claimed to possess ancient wisdom discovered in a secret underground chamber regarding the ultimate secrets of the universe. There is some evidence that Bueller Lytton believed in the possibility of the subterranean world, for he wrote to his friend Hargrave Jennings in 1854. So Rosencreutz, the founder of the Rosicrucians, founded his wisdom in a secret chamber. So we all, there is much to be learned from the substrata of our planet. Some writers, including Alec McClellan, author of the fascinating book The Lost Worlds of Agartha, I'm guessing, in 1996, have suggested that the coming race revealed too much of the subterranean world and was as a result suppressed in the years following Bueller Lytton's death in 1873. Indeed, he describes the book as one of the hardest to find of all books of mysticism, and informs us his own search for a copy, for which years took him, he met with no success. While doubtlessly an intriguing piece of stage setting on McClellan's part, the rarity of the book can surely be accounted for by the unjust waning of Bueller Lytton's posthumous literary reputation. What is the connection between Buller Lytton's strange novel and the Third Reich? If there really was a large colony of Tibetan monks in Berlin in the 1940s, what were they doing there? It seems that the connection was none other than General Professor Karl Haushofer, whose theories of geopolitics gave rise to the concept of Lebensraum, living in space, which Hitler maintained would be necessary to the continued dominance of the superior Aryan race, in which he intended to take primarily from the Soviet Union. Haushofer, along with Dietrich Eckart, the journalist and playwright who influenced Hitler by training him in the occult sciences, and in addition introduced him to the influential social circus after the First World, is frequently described as a practicing black magician and probably the master magician of the National Socialist Party. Haushofer excelled at Munich University, where he began to develop his lifelong interest in the Far East. After leaving university, he entered the German army, where his great intelligence ensured a rapid rise to the ranks. His knowledge from the Far East earned him a posting as military attaché in Japan. Haushofer believed that the German people originated in Central Asia and that it was the Indo-Germanic race which guaranteed the permanence, nobility, and greatness of the world. While in Japan, Haushofer was initiated into one of the most important secret Buddhist societies, and to have sworn, if he failed in his mission, to commit suicide in accordance to his lifetime honored ceremony. Haushofer was also a firm believer in the legend of Thule, the lost Aryan homeland in the far north, which had once been the center of an advanced civilization possessed of magical powers. So Thule was also known to be green, like Greenland-ish, and above it, and is referenced to be, I think, Odin's land. So the lands where the Vikings also say these people, these gods were from, Odin and all those dudes. Okay, yeah. So that's what Thule is, and they created the Thule Society later because obviously the Germans still studied the Vikings and all their cultism, and they took all that stuff. Connecting the legend with the Thule Society, we could say that beings intermediate between man and other intelligent beings from beyond would place at the disposal of the Thule Society initiates a reservoir of forces which could be drawn on to enable Germany to dominate the world again and be the cradle of the coming race of supermen, which would result from the mutations of the human species. One day, her legions would set out to annihilate everything that had stood in the way of the spiritual destiny of Earth, and their leaders would be men who knew everything, derived their strength from the very fountainhead of energy, and guided by the great ones of the ancient world. It would seem that it was under the influence of Eckhart and Haushofer that the Thule Society took on its true character of a society of initiates in communion with the invisible and became the magic center of the nationalist socialist movement. So the National Socialist Movement 100 years ago got completely uh empowered up by the black magic arts. After the end of the First World War, Haushofer returned to Munich, where he gained a doctorate from the university. He divided his time between teaching and writing and founded the Geopolitical Review, in which he published his ideas in Lebensraum, which he could both justify a territorial conquest by invoking the colonizing of Slavlands by Turkic knights in the Middle Ages, and emotively conjure up notions of uniting in the Reich what came to be described as Volkenduas scattered throughout Eastern Europe. While incarcerated in the fortress of Landsberg am Lech, following the failure of Munich Putsch in 1924, Adolf Hitler read and was influenced by Haushofer's book on geopolitics. He had already been introduced to Haushofer by the professor's student's assistant, Rudolf Hess. There is no doubt that Hitler occupied his time in Landsberg judiciously, reading widely in several fields, though not for the sake of education so much as to confirm and clarify his own preconceptions. He later said that Landsberg was his university paid for by the state, Haushofer visited Hitler every day in Landsberg, where he explained his geopolitical theories and described his travels through India in the early years of the century. While in India, he had heard stories of a powerful civilization living underneath the Himalayas 30 or 40 centuries ago in the region of Gobi. There was a highly developed civilization. As the result of a catastrophe, the Gobi was transformed into a desert, and the survivors emigrated, some going to extreme north of Europe and other going towards the Caucasus. The Scandinavian god Thor is supposed to have been one of the heroes in this migration. Haushofer proclaimed the necessity of a return of the sources of the human race. In other words, that it is necessary to conquer the whole of Eastern Europe, Turkestan, Pamir, Gobi, and Tibet. These countries constituted, in his opinion, the central core, and whoever had control of them controlled the whole world. After the cataclysm that destroyed the Gobi civilization, the survivors migrated to a vast cavern system beneath the Himalayas, where they split into two groups, one of which followed the path of spirituality, enlightenment, and meditation, while the others followed the path of violence and materialistic power. The first of these centers was called Agartha, the other Shambhala. These names have many different spelling for Agartha. We use the simplest for Shambhala, the spelling favored by the Orientalists. Among the many books Hitler read while languishing in Landsberg was Bueller Leighton's The Coming Race, which Haushofer informed him was an essentially correct description of the race of Supermen living far beneath the surface of the earth, and corroborated much of what the professor had learned himself while traveling in Asia. Bueller Leighton's novel apparently galvanized Hitler's imagination, and he began to yearn for the day when he might establish for himself the actuality of the secret civilization beneath the snows of Tibet. In the following year, 1925, the Vril Society, also known as the Luminous Lodge, was formed by a group of Berlin Rosicrucians, including Karl Haushofer. There is also one primary source of information on the Vril Society: Willy Ley, a German rocket engineer who fled to the United States in 1933 and followed a successful career writing popular science books. The subterranean humanity may have been fiction, but the Vril was not. Possibly it had enabled the British, who kept it a state secret, to amass their colonial empire. Surely the Romans had it, and referred to it as Laudes. Such a group actually existed. They even got the first issue of a magazine, which was to proclaim their credit. The real members contemplated the structure of an apple, sliced in half. Um, this echoes Rudolf Steiner's suggestion in Knowledge of Higher Worlds and Attainment. In addition, Theosophists were themselves interested in the concept of the Vril force, which bears some resemblance to Reisenberg's odic force and the astral light, and the subtle form of energy said to surround the earth, in which is preserved a record of every thought and action that has ever occurred. Or some people would know that as the astral realm, the Akashic planes, the Vril plane, the energy force. So they're trying to, I don't know, they think that it's all one force, like the astral and this power that can change reality. I'm not saying that these dudes are wrong nor right. It just seems on another dimension what they know, and I I'm not there yet. It is believed that Haushofer introduced Hitler to the leader of the group of Tibetan High Lamas living in Berlin, a man known only as the man in green, um, the man with the green gloves, and that this man knew the locations of the hidden entrances to the subterranean realms of Agartha and Shambhala. These rumors doubtless gave rise to the famous legends about Hitler's obsessive search for the entrances of the inner world. The first expeditions were dispatched purely under the auspices of the Luminous Lodge, beginning in 1926, but later, after coming to power, Hitler took a more direct interest, overseeing the organization of the searches himself. Hitler believed unequivocally that certain representatives of the underground super race were already abroad in the world, as Hitler is reported to have related, "The new man is among us. He is here. Now, are you satisfied? I will tell you a secret. I have seen the vision of the new man, fearless and formidable. I shrink from him." Hitler also ordered a number of expeditions into Germany, Swiss, and Italian mines to search for the entrances to the cavern cities of the Supermen. The Untersberg is known to be inhabited by certain kind of elemental spirits of nature, some of which are good and benevolent, others of a wicked and malicious nature and inimical to mankind. And there are innumerable tales circulating among the people of the neighborhood telling about the doings of the gnomes, fairies, and giants dwelling within caves and in gorgeous marble halls and grottos filled with gold and precious stones that will turn into dead leaves and stones when seen in the light of day. Like trolls and like Lord of the Rings, which Lord of the Rings was written by a military head. So you know, it's based loosely on some interesting stuff. Some of the friendly tribes come out of the Untersberg on certain occasions, and they are said to have sometimes associated with inhabitants of our plane of existence, partaking in the dances and amusements of the peasants, and even taking straight chances. Asserted by those who know that marriages had taken place between citizens of our world and the inhabitants of the kingdom of the Untersberg. There dwells the soul of a great emperor in his astral form there, together with his retinue. He sleeps with an enchanted sleep, waiting for the liberation of his country, sometimes very suddenly. Even on the clear summer day, clouds are seen to issue from the sides of the mountain, grotesquely formed ghost like mist go ride from the caverns and precipice, crawling and gliding slowly upwards toward the top and forming on the neighboring peaks also clouds of monstrous shapes and sometimes of gigantic proportions floating on until the head of the Untersberg is surrounded by a surging area of vapors growing dense and dark in sea. Seldom included in historical analysis of the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler is spiritually mesmerizing impact of Mount Untersberg. Hitler's first direct encounter took place in 1923, upon which date the future Fuhrer would describe his feelings. "It was so wonderful, a view of Untersberg, indescribable." While not specifically recorded, it is unlikely that the youthful Hitler would have been unaware of the writings of Franz Hartmann. A recent expedition into the gigantic cave system under the mountain revealed that it goes down so far that its lowest point had not been reached yet. And Hitler said to have reached it. The cave explorers had to return from the expedition without knowing how far it goes. And on the terrace, Hitler installed the finest, large terrestrial telescope so that he could observe the mysterious Unterberg in detail. According to a German newspaper report, they had gone down 1,056 meters before they were forced to return at an abyss-like precipice. This had accomplished by being able to pass an extremely narrow passageway that had been previously impassable. They also discovered more than 800 new passageways and a lake at 930 meters depth. Holy snap. So there's lakes in these mountains. That just reminds me of man, that video game Ghost Recon, the new one where they're in the South America. Hitler is even said to have ordered research to be conducted into the life of Bueller Lighton in an effort to be determined whether the author himself had vanished in the realm of Vril. Antian Horok, an expert speleologist and a member of the Slovak uprising, accidentally discovered a strange strange tunnel in Czechoslovakia in October 1944. Dr. Horrocks kept quiet about the discovery until 1965, when he published an account in the National Spielag Society News. In his article, Dr. Horrocks stated that he and two other resistance fighters found the tunnel near the villages of Plevince and Lubonka. He is quite specific about the location: 49.2 degrees north, 20.7 degrees east. Having just survived a skirmish with the Germans, the three men, one of them who was badly injured, asked a local peasant for help. He led them to an underground grotto where they could hide and rest. The peasant told the resistance men that the cave contained pits, pockets of poison gas, and was also haunted, and warned them against venturing too far inside. This they had no intention of doing. Such was their wariness. They attended to the wounds of their comrade and fell asleep. The following day, Horrocks' curiosity got the better of him, and while he waited for the injured man to recover enough strength to travel again, he decided to do a little exploring inside the cave. Presently, he came to a section that was completely different than the rest of the cave. Lighting some torches, I saw that I was in a spacious curved black shaft formed by cliff-like walls. The floor in the incline was a solid lime pavement. So deep in these mountains, there is formed walkways, and like a lot of people think there's actually, cities inside these mountains. The tunnel stretched interminably into the distance. Dr. Horak decided to take a sample of the wall, but was unable to make any impression with his pickaxe. He took his pistol and fired at the wall. The bullet stammered into the substance of the wall with a deafening, fiery impact. He wrote, "Sparks flashed, and there was a roaring sound. A small well appeared about the length of half of my finger, which gave off a pungent smell." Dr. Horrock then returned to his comrades and told them about the apparently man-made tunnel. I sat there by the fire speculating. How far did it reach into the rocks? I wondered who or what put it into the mountains. Was it man-made? And was it at last proof of the truth in legends like Plato's of long-lost civilizations with magic technologies which our rationale cannot grasp or believe? No one else apparently had explored this tunnel since Dr. Horrock in 1944. The peasants who lived in the region obviously knew its existence but kept well away. In addition to the stories of German mine expeditions in Central and Eastern Europe during the Second World War, occult writers have frequently made reference to the German Tibet expeditions, allegedly in an attempt to locate and make contact with a group of high lamas with access to fantastic power. The American researcher Peter Levenda experienced skepticism with regard to the supposed Nazi Tibet connection until he began to search for references in the microfilmed records of the captured German document sections of the National Archives in Washington, D.C. He discovered a wealth of material running to many hundreds of pages dealing with the work of Dr. Ernst Schaefer of the Annenneber. These documents included Dr. Schaefer's personal notebooks, his correspondence clippings from several German newspapers, and his SS file, which describes an expedition to East and Central Tibet from 1934 and 1936, and the official SS Tibet expeditions from 1938 and 1939 under his belt and leadership. As Lavenda demonstrates, the expedition was not as much concerned with contacting Tibetan representatives of the subterranean super race as the cataloging of flora and fauna in the region, an activity of little military value to the Reich, which accounts for the difficulties Schaefer occasionally had in securing funds for his trip. Born in Cologne on 1910, March 14th, into a wealthy industrial family, Ernst Schaefer attended school in Heidelberg and Göttingen and embarked on his first expedition to Tibet in 1930 under the auspices of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia when he was only 20 years old. The following year, he joined the American Brooke Dolan expedition to Siberia, China, and Tibet. He became a member of the SS in mid-1933, finally reaching the rank of Sturmbannführer in 1942. In addition to being an SS officer, Schaefer was also a respected scientist who published papers in various journals such as Proceedings of the Academy of Natural Sciences, Philadelphia. Schaefer was a man of many parts, one part SS officer, one part scholar, one part explorer, and one part scientist. A National Socialist, Indiana Jones. Schaefer was also deeply interested in the religious and cultural practices of Tibetans, including their sexuality, and indeed the members of 1938 and 1939 expedition displayed a somewhat prurient fascination with intimate practices and orgies. I bet the filmmaker Ernst Cross, for instance, took great care to record his observation of a 15-year-old Landstrom girl masturbating on a bridge beam. What the fuck? So these dudes were pedos and these dudes were sick. Oh man, when not cataloging flora and fauna and spying on teenage girls, the members of the expedition managed to conduct other research, which included the exhaustive study of the physical attributes of the Tibetan people. Schaefer noted and height and weight, the shape of hands and feet, the color, the shape of eyes, and even took plaster casts of Tibetan faces. At first, it might seem strange in the extreme that architects of the Third Reich would be interested in a region that might be considered the spiritual center of the world until that is, we remember that according to Thulian mythology, the center was once the Aryan homeland of the Arctic and was the place with the fall of Atlantis around 10,800 BC. Since then, the spiritual center, while remaining hidden from the vast majority of humanity who are unworthy of its secrets, has nevertheless been the primary force controlling the destiny of the planet. The two hidden realms of Agartha and Shambhala constitute the double source of supernatural power emanating from Tibet and have come to occupy an important place in 20th century occultism and fringe science. The Third Reich Tibet connection. Tibet was once the Aryan homeland in the Arctic and was the place with the fall of Atlantis around 10,800 BC. Since then, the spiritual center, while remaining hidden from the vast majority of the humanity who are unworthy of its secrets, has nevertheless been the primary force controlling the destiny of the planet. The two hidden realms of Agartha and Shambhala constitute the double source of supernatural power emanating from Tibet and have come to occupy an important place in 20th century occultism and occult sciences. Before we address the Third Reich's alleged interest in Agartha and Shambhala, it is essential that we pause for an examination of the role of Shambhala in Tibetan mysticism. The ancient writings of China refer to Nu and Kuwa, the Asiatic prototypes of Adam and Eve, and their birthplace in the Kunlun Mountains of Central Asia. It is something of a mysterious why such a desolate, forbidding place should serve as Chinese Garden of Eden rather than a more hospitable region such as Yangtze River or the province of Shantung. And we can speculate the Gobi Desert may at one time been an inland sea with accompanying fertile land. The Gobi is a prime candidate for a site of one of the ancient and unknown civilizing cultures whose wisdom has been passed down through the ages. The concept of an Oriental Garden of Eden in the center of Asia was popularized by the novel Lost Horizon. Lost Horizon is a 1933 novel of the English James Hilton. The book was turned into a movie in 1937 by director Frank Capra. It is best remembered as the origin of Shangri-La, a fictional utopian lamestry high in the mountains of Tibet. The Kunlun Mountains hold a very important place in Chinese mythology, since it is in this range that the immortals are believed to live, ruled by Xiai Wang Mu, the Queen Mother of the West. Xiai Wang Mu, who is also Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy, is said to live in a nine-storied palace of jade. The Jade Emperor, the Jade Empress, the Jade. Okay. Surrounding this palace is a vast garden in which the peach tree of immortality grows. Only the most wise and virtuous of human beings are permitted to visit the garden and eat the fruit, which appears only once every 6,000 years. Interesting. Yeah. So I remember a movie they talked about something like that. Hmm. The immortals and the towards wisdom and compassion possess perfect ageless bodies and are said to of other star systems. Whether the ancient Chinese believed that the immortals could travel in space in their physical bodies or projecting their minds, this is still remarkable of a conception to entertain since it is based on an acceptance of the plurality of inhabited worlds in the cosmos. Ancient Chinese texts are replete with legends regarding the attempts of many people to cross the Gobi Desert to the Kunlun Mountains. The most famous of these searches is surely the great philosopher Lao Tzu in 6th century BC, author of the Book of Taoist Teachings, Tai Ti Ching, who is said to have made the journey across the Gobi towards the end of his life. The Vatican archives are also contain many reports made by the Catholic missionaries concerning deputations from the emperors of China to the spiritual beings living in the mountains. These beings possess bodies that are visible, but which are not made flesh and blood. They are the mind-born gods whose bodies are composed of elementary atomic matter, which allow them to live anywhere in the universe, even at the centers of stars. The people of India also believe in a place of wisdom and spiritual perfection, called it Kalapa or Katapa, and it is said to lie in a region north of the Himalayas in Tibet. According to Indian tradition, the Gobi Desert is the floor of what was once a great sea, which contained an island called Sweta Dvapa, or White Island. The great yogis who once lived there are believed to live there still in the high mountains and deep valleys that once formed the islands of Sweta Dvipa. The island is identified by Orientalists with the Eye of Shambhala and of Puranic nature, which is said to stand at the center of a lake of nectar. In the 17th century, two Jesuit missionaries, Stephen Kachala and John Cabral, recorded the existence of Chang Shambhala as described to them by the lamas of Shigatst, where Kasela lived for 23 years until his death in 1650. Chang Shambhala means northern Shambhala, which differentiates the abode of the spiritual depths from the town called Shambhala, north of Benares, India. Legends of a hidden spiritual center, a sacred zone where inhabitants sacredly guide the evolution of life on Earth, are widespread in the ancient cultures of the East. The concept of the hidden spiritual center, a sacred zone whose inhabitants secretly guide the evolution of life on Earth, are widespread. The concept of the hidden spiritual centers of the world to be found in Hindu traditions in the Bon religion of pre-Buddhist Tibet. Shambhala is also called Umulunrig or Dijong in Tibetan Buddhism. The Shambhalic tradition is enshrined with the Kalak Chakra texts, which are said to have been taught to the king of Shambhala by the Buddha before being returned to India. As might be expected with such marvelous legend haunted place, there has been a great deal of speculation as the exact whereabouts of Shambhala. While some esoterics believe that Shambhala is a real place with a concrete physical presence and a secret location on Earth, others prefer to see it existing on a higher spiritual plane, what might be called another dimension of space-time matter in our own planet. Which, if you think about, that's what they think Bermuda Triangle is. It's just another dimension of land that once we get into, we shift reality. As with the Grail Shambhala, maybe a state of consciousness within ourselves in which we gain an insight into the higher spirituality inherent in the universe, as distinct from the mundane world of base matter in which we normally exist. Having said this, It should be noticed that there are certain cases on record in which Westerners have experienced visions of a place bearing a striking resemblance to the faded Shambhala. Our knowledge of the Shambhalic traditions in the West has come mainly from Orientalist scholars such as Helena Blavatsky, Rene Gunon, Lois Jacaliat, Saint Ives of d'Aldevre, Alvader, and Nicholas Roerich. Shambhala and Theosophy, or Theosophy. The first time that we have anything written in European language about Shambhala was in 1833. This was the great Hungarian scholar Somo de Koros, author of the first Tibetan English dictionary. He wrote an article about Chakra, and in it he mentions Shambhala, and that is the first time that anybody in Europe hears anything about Shambhala. Over the following decades, we find a little bit more becomes available. In the 1860s, a book was published in German called Schlager nicht in White, called Buddhism in Tibet, that also speaks about Shambhala. In addition to Vishnu Purana, it gets translated to English and mentions Shambhala. At the time, Madame Blavatsky traveled to India. The only source of information that she had about Shambhala were from two above publications. Now, in terms of the development of European ideas about Shambhala, we find that there are two main streams that develop. One is emphasize Shambhala as a spiritual paradise, and the other one derives from the idea that the forces of Shambhala destroyed or drove out the harmful invaders that were trying to do away with all spiritual practice. So, a more destructive aspect of Shambhala is introduced, forcefully purifying the world of so called evil. Blavatsky, however, emphasized the first aspect, that of Shambhala being a spiritual land, introduced in the terms of Buddhist and Hindu geography, with Mount Meru at the center and the four continents surrounding it. The first of these continents, Lemuria, sank with the inhabitants moving to another continent, which Blavatsky identified as Atlantis. The spiritually developed ones, however, fled to Shambhala when Atlantis was taken over by the Blavatsky claimed that Shambhala was a sacred island in the Gobi Desert. It is later claimed by Roerich, among others, that Shambhala was the source of her teachings, the Secret Doctrine. Nicholas Roerich, a poet, artist, mystic, and humanist, and perhaps the most famous and respected of the esotericists who brought news of this fabulous realm to the Westerners. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia, Nicholas Roerich became a distinguished member of a family whose ability to trace its origin to the Vikings, so I wasn't too far off, of the 10th century, inspired his early interest in archaeology. This interest led into a lifelong fascination with art, through in which words of K.P. Tampy, who wrote a monograph on Roerich in 1935, he became a possessed of burning desire. After attending St. Petersburg Academy of Fine Art, Roerich went to Paris to continue his studies. In 1906, he went on a prize for his design of a new church and was also awarded with the position of a director of the Academy for the Encouragement of Fine Arts in Russia. However, the Russian Revolution occurred while he was on a visit to America and was himself found unable to return to the motherland. Roerich's profound interest in Buddhist mysticism led to proposing an expedition in 1923 that would explore India, Mongolia, and Tibet. This Roerich expedition in 1923 to 1926 was made across the Gobi Desert and the Altai Mountains. It was during this expedition that Roerich's party had a most unusual experience, one of the many experiences that seem to offer strange and puzzling connections between apparently disparate elements of the paranormal and the inquiry. In the summer of 1926, George Rorik and several Mongolian guides in the Sharagol Valley near the Humboldt Mountains between Mongolia and Tibet. Rorik had just built a white stupa shrine dedicated to Shambhala. The shrine was consecrated in August, with the ceremony witnessed by a number of invited lamas. 2 days later, the party watched a large blackbird far beyond the blackbird, high up in the cloudiness. They clearly saw a golden spheroidal object moving from the Altoy Mountains to the north at tremendous speeds. Veering sharply to the southwest, the golden sphere disappeared rapidly beyond the Humboldt Mountains. The Mongolian guides shouted to one another in the utmost excitement. One of the lamas turned to Rorik and informed him that the fabulous golden orb was a sign of Shambhala, meaning that the lords of the realm approved of his mission of exploration. Later, Rorik asked by another lama if he had perfume on the air. When Rorik replied that he had none, the Lama told him that he was guarded by the king of Shambhala, Rigdan Jaipo, that the black vulture was his enemy, but that he was protected by a radiant form of matter. The Lama added that anyone who saw the radiant sphere should follow the direction which it flew, for in that direction lay Shambhala. The exact purpose of this expedition, aside from exploration, was never made entirely clear by Rorik, but many writers on esoteric subjects have claimed that he was on a mission to return a certain sacred object to a king's tower at the center of Shambhala. Kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings, where they're trying to take back this ancient technology back into the center of the volcano, and trying to take an ancient technology back into another dimensional pocket for other dimensional beings. According to Andrew Thomas, the sacred object was a fragment of the Chintamani stone, the great mass of which lies in the tower. Astonishingly, the stone is said to have been brought to Earth originally by extraterrestrial beings. And that is part one of the Vril. That was pretty in depth, and I will go in depth more another day. You guys have a wonderful night. Let me know what you think in the comments, what you found fascinating or correlating with this research. Hey, blessings to all, blessings to all, blessings to all. Hey, have a good night. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Peace out.